Michael Myers has been in Dead by Daylight since the 25th of October 2016, almost 6 years ago. He was the second killer ever to be added to the game and the first ever licensed killer to be added. Despite being in the game for so long, he's remained almost unchanged. He's only ever had very slight buffs or nerfs to his kit, with the last change being made to him in the 3.3.1 patch, which was almost 3 years ago. This is especially unusual when we look at the 4 killers before him and even the next 2 killers after him, who've all had major balance changes or even slight reworks. Due to Myers' lack of update to his kit, he now feels outdated among the roster of killers. When Myers first entered the fog, he was both a scary and powerful killer, but now he finds himself near the bottom of many tier lists, and is even a contender for Dead by Daylight's weakest killer. But why is Myers considered so weak? Myers unfortunately has a few problems with his power. To summarize briefly, these problems are, starting with a debuff. In tier 1, Myers moves extremely slow with a short lunge, making him lose a lot of early game pressure. Gaining his power is tedious. Having to stand still to slowly gain your power isn't ideal. And his tier 3 is slightly lacking. When compared to Plague's Corrupt Purge or Oni's Blood Fury, it leaves a little to be desired. But despite Myers' low tier status, his power is still loved by many, and this is for good reason. Myers' power is extremely faithful to his movies, and playing him makes you feel like Michael Myers. His power also lends to a fun and unique playstyle that allows you to jump scare survivors and truly make them scared. It's for these reasons that I don't think Myers' power needs to be changed drastically. If you've seen my video where I talk about how I changed Freddy, I almost completely rework his power, but I don't think that should be the case for Myers. I would like to rework Myers to a similar extent to the rework the Doctor got a while back, so keeping the fundamentals of his power but changing various bits of it to make it flow better. This is how I would rework Michael Myers in Dead by Daylight. To start, I'm going to go over how I would change Myers' early game, specifically his tier 1. The problem with Myers' early game is that he starts with such a disadvantage that can be difficult to get out of. If you're on an open or large map, Myers' slow speed is a huge detriment to him. It takes him ages to travel to each gen, and if he chooses the wrong gen to go to or the survivors see him coming and hide, 1 or 2 gens can be done without him even damaging anybody. That being said, I don't think his tier 1 should be just removed outright. Michael's tier 1 can allow for some fun and interesting plays. Instead, here's what I'd do. To try and improve tier 1, I would make it so that your stock meter would automatically fill up from the start of the game and be full after 30 seconds. This would only bring you from tier 1 to tier 2 and not from tier 2 to tier 3. I would also make it so when your stock meter fills up, it doesn't automatically put you in the next tier. Instead, you'll have to prompt to progress to the next tier, similar to Oni when he fills his power meter. This change would ensure Myers isn't in tier 1 for any longer than he needs to be, while also giving the option to stay in tier 1 in case you want to do any stealth plays. Next, I'd change slightly how his stock mechanic works. Before I go over what exactly I'd change, I'm going to explain briefly how his current stock mechanic works. Myers stalks survivors and drains them of their stock points. Each survivor has 10.1 stock points and it takes Michael 5 points per evil within tier. Michael's stock ranges from 2.5 meters to 39.85 meters. It takes 6 seconds of stalking to gain a tier of evil within at the 2.5 meter mark, but takes 60 seconds of stalking at the 39.85 meter mark. This means distance greatly impacts his stalk rate. Myers can also not stalk multiple survivors at once and will instead stalk the closest survivor to him. The problem with his stalk is with how it works, it encourages you to get as close to the survivor as possible and punishes you for stalking them from afar, like Michael did in his movies. To try and fix this, here's what I'd do. If a survivor is standing still or doing an action, i.e. healing or working on a gen, the distance debuff wouldn't apply. Let me explain. This change would hopefully make it so Myers gets rewarded for stalking oblivious survivors from afar. If the survivor saw Michael, they could start to run away, and because they're not standing still or doing an action, the current distance debuff would slow down the stalk. This would ensure that Myers gets rewarded for stealthily stalking survivors despite the distance. Also, as mentioned with the tier 1 changes, I wouldn't make it so Myers instantly goes into tier 3 when his stock meter fills up. Instead, I'd give him the prompt to go in like I mentioned before. This would stop the need to 99 his power. One more change I'd make to his stalking has to do with the survivors, specifically their stock points. If you fully tier up twice from a single survivor, you basically won't be able to get any more stock off them for the rest of the game. Initially when this was added way back, I think it was to stop Myers from taking advantage of a survivor who was either AFK, throwing the game, or teaming with the killer. Unfortunately, this mechanic seems to just overall make Myers weaker. To fix this, I'd make it so when survivors work on gens or heal other survivors, they'll start to get back their stock points. This means if a survivor is trying to give Myers his power multiple times, they'll also have to help with the objective. Finally, the last thing I changed is Myers tier 3. As mentioned before, his tier 3 pales in comparison to Oni's Blood Fury or Plague's Corrupt Purge. To fix this, I'd try and give it a little buff while keeping it faithful to both Myers' character and original power design. Firstly, I'd give him a small increase in braking speeds while in tier 3. This should hopefully make him just a bit stronger in chase. Secondly, I'd make it so Mars still moves at his base speed when cleaning his weapon after a successful attack while in tier 3. This would greatly increase his snowball potential and would make him a real threat to every survivor near him when he goes into tier 3. I think it would also be faithful to the movies as we see Mars take on multiple opponents successfully on more than one occasion. That concludes all I would change to try and make Michael Myers better. If you have any other suggestions and changes you'd make to him, or anything you'd change from what I've said, please leave a comment below. If you made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe or watch some of my other videos. That's all for now. Thank you, and goodbye.